Welcome to Rainbow Soul, part of the WLFE DB network, an explorative discussion about spirituality beyond mainstream religions. Hollis Taylor, author, psychic, astrologer, and alchemical mage, brings their non-binary perspective together with fellow drag king and trans man LaCrosse Ortiz, a Jewish Taino with spiritual background of exploration that has led him to an atheist perspective. Join these guys as they explore deep and difficult topics, all related to spirituality, offering a queer perspective, an exploration of interesting topics, and engaging guests to help explore conversations for the Rainbow Soul.
Hey.
Hi. Hey, everyone. We're so glad you're here to catch Rainbow Soul. Man, we are super excited about today's show. I'm super excited and so happy and honored to have this very special guest. And first, let's start with me today. I'm Hollis Taylor. In case you didn't know, I'm a witch. I'm an alchemical mage. I'm a psychic and an author. So if you want to check me out, you can go to my website, divineandrogen.com. I do offer readings and have a book about being gender variance and how to implement that in your life in a good way, especially from a spiritual perspective. And this here is my buddy LaCrosse.
Hi, everybody. So good to be back. It's like a week. It seems like it's forever. It's like a week goes by so fast, but not fast enough when it comes to talking about this. I'm LaCrosse Ortiz. I am a Jewish Taino atheist / spiritual. My whole thing is I don't believe that you have to believe in a supreme being to be spiritual. You can walk the path and use more accountability and responsibility in your journey. And that's pretty much what I do. Oh, and you can catch me on Facebook, Instagram, everywhere. I'm all over the place.
Don't miss his totally awesome LGBTQIA podcast, a storytelling podcast where you can hear stories of all kinds of very interesting LGBTQIA people. And today we are going, first I want to say this. If you're watching and you have a dream that you want interpreted at the middle of the show, make sure you get it typed to me in the comments. Even if you type it up now, I can save it and then give it to LaCrosse so he can interpret it. And so be sure to, if you have a dream that you want interpreted, that you put it in the chat for us right now, and I'll choose one and we'll feature it, and he'll do his best to help you understand the messages from your divine self, is what I think a dream is.
Right.
So anyway, LaCrosse, why don't you tell us about your our really awesome guest today?
Okay, our guest today, he is the chief of a tribe here in Lancaster. It's called Cacike Manicato. The tribe started about 7 years ago. There's a museum here, and he is the chief and the Beh-HEE-keh. Beh-HEE-keh is what we call our medicine people. So he has like double roles in this. So he's got a lot on his plate, but please say hello. His name is Gwa Too Ee Ree, Cacike Guatu Iri. So give a warm welcome. Hi.
Hello, everyone. Nice to be here. I'm very excited.
Yes.
Welcome. I'm so glad you're here. So we get that you are sort of like the chief of the Taino tribe there, local in Pennsylvania. Is that true? Can you help us understand who you are?
So for some time, it's a long story. I'll try to give you a condensed version. For the longest time, I had been in the journey to find out about our Taino ancestry, our nativeness, and the books tell you that we're extinct. And so I always went around thinking there were no Taínos until Lacrosse calls me up one day and tells me, hey, there's this tribe in Lancaster. So dialing the years going further, about 3 years, as a group, we didn't have a place that we could call our own. So I had a vision of getting a place where we could start having our own ceremonies and all that. The elders of the tribe asked me to be the chief of the tribe, and after about 2 or 3 times that they asked me, I finally said yes, and I started to really dive into grasping as much as I possibly could, because I knew that my first, being a chief of a tribe is being a servant. And you serve your people and you take care of the needs of your people and you provide for your people. So I went on this journey to try to figure out, okay, what do we need to do? How do we need to do it? And hence the Taino Cultural Center came into existence. And I started rescuing artifacts that were being sold out there, bringing them back to the people. We started to learn songs. We started to learn ceremonies and the history, culture. And that's really how this all began. And we've been there for 5 years, 6 years. I lose track.
Yeah, it's been no, I think it's been longer.
Probably is. And we are the best kept secret in Lancaster.
That's definitely true. I hear an echo. Is there an echo?
A little bit. Yeah, I'm not sure where that's coming from.
I'm trying to think. Okay. Oh, that sounds better. I think I had to move this.
Oh.
Yeah.
So that's how the story began.
Right. And if we could elaborate now, I think a lot of people don't know a lot about the Taino because once again, we are considered extinct within the history books. If you could explain, like from the beginning, who the Taino are, how they got there, and we can go into the conquest. So if you could give a little bit about the history.
Well, our ancestors came from South America. They migrated through the Lesser Antilles until they got to the Greater Antilles, and they migrated as far as Jamaica, the Bahamas. They even got as far as getting into Florida. So as the migration began, they went into different phases, and each phase that migrated brought along with it pottery and culture. In the beginnings, it wasn't as elaborate a society as when it really came into fruition when the Taínos came to be. And the Taínos were a very organized society. Hunter-gatherers, they planted, they lived in the mountains as well as in the coastal areas. So there was a lot of commerce going back and forth between the coastal and the mountainous regions. They were also great travelers. They would have canoes, which in Taino is canoa. They would have canoes that could house as many as 200 to 300 people on it. And they would take stuff and they would go into Mayan territory and they would interact and exchange goods with the Mayans. And you think of the ball game that they have. Well, we have the same ball game, which is Batu. So I'm imagining that we adopted that from the Mayan culture. So that's really how our story began until the 1400s when they came into contact with Christopher Columbus. And of course, we know what their intent was. Their intent was to conquer, and their sole interest was in gold. They had no interest in preserving society or culture. They began to use the Taínos as slaves, but the Taínos were not made for that. They weren't built for that. So eventually they brought in other slaves, and they pretty much decimated the people. They didn't wipe it out because there were those who had then escaped into the mountainous areas. I remember when I had a conversation with my grandmother, and my grandmother, I said, "Hey, Grandma, can you talk to me about the Tainos?" And my grandma says, "Oh, we don't talk about that." And I said, "Well, I want to know about it." So it's like she snickered, and then she started telling me the stories. She started telling the stories of when the Spaniards came, and the Tainos would run, and the women would throw themselves off the cliffs with their babies because they didn't want to get captured, because they knew the torture that they were going to endure at the hands of the Spaniards. So it was the atrocities that happened were very bad. But I tend not to like to dwell too much on that, because I like to think about where we are now, that we've persevered. We have been resilient. We are, the resurgence started in the 70s and 80s. That's when it really began. When we started coming out, we started, claiming our identity and claiming our heritage and claiming our culture and claiming our language, claiming our art. And that's where, to me, the exciting part of the story is. Columbus, okay, I'm so done with Columbus,
Yeah.
that I don't even want to talk about it anymore. But what's going on now, which is
Right.
really exciting, is the resurgence and how people are becoming, getting an awareness, and where you only knew of a couple of thousands, now we've got thousands upon thousands of people who are claiming that nativeness that they have inside of them. It's calling to them like it called to me over 30 years ago. So that's how it all began.
There was a interesting point that we had gotten all our DNAs done. Like, I got my DNA done, and I remember you had gotten your DNA done, and to be able to get the DNA done and see, like, literally on paper, this validation of, because a lot of times I think, people want that, they want to connect to that indigenous part of them, but it's scary when you don't have proof, when it's just hearsay and saying, oh, well, we were Indians and our family was, Indians from this part and that part. But when you can actually get your DNA done and see that validation of the culture and saying, well, either it's over 14% or 13%, but it's there. And
Right.
it's just a confirmation that our people are still there. And I think that's such a beautiful thing. Like, I know, if you could explain how, when you had your DNA done, how that worked for you.
Well, I knew that I knew that there had to be something, and it was funny because we thought that it would be coming from my father's side of the family, because typically it does come from the side of the family, and the reason was because most of the women were taken and they mingled, so there were not many men left, because they died during the slavery, they were killed. So, and the more men they killed, the less of a threat the Tainos became. So they preserved the women and killed off as many men as they could. So then the DNA predominantly was coming through from the mother. Well, in our family, it didn't come from my father. It came from my grandfather on my mother's side.
Yeah.
So when I took my DNA, I did my grandmother on my father's side, but we call her Guela. Her name was Guela, and her nativeness came from North America. So she had a very, very low percentage of Taino DNA compared to me, and that blew my mind. I was like, wait a minute, how can I have a bigger? She looks more native than I do. But come to find out that my great grandmother married an individual who was a transient person, and they knew that he was indigenous, and therefore that's where the indigenous DNA came through in our family. So we're kind of like an anomaly, because typically it comes from the maternal. In our case, it came from the paternal.
Right. That's
even though it came through my mom, but it came through my grandfather, not my grandmother.
Right. And when you start thinking, the society as a whole, like the Taínos as a whole, I know that it was it's a matrifocal community.
It was a matriarchal
community. Right.
So,
community.
It's not to say that the men didn't have value. The men had value, but in those times, it was the females that would nominate the cacique. You had your female elders, and they would say who the next chief was going to be. And there's so many different stories that come back and forth, you know. So one would say, no, it came this way, no, it came that way. And when I started reading the chronicles, and I started reading from the Rey Bartolomé de las Casas and Ramon Panay, those are two friars that lived during that time and were individuals that really noted and accounted for daily life in the Taínos. So that's how we were able to obtain a lot of our information, is from those chronicles. So a lot of people say, "Oh no, the chief comes from the matriarchal part of the family, or it comes from the sister." But well, that wasn't true. If there was no male heir that could take over the cacicazo, which is the chiefdom, then the sister of the chief would, if she had a son, that one would take over. So there were protocols that they had, but predominantly the women had a large voice in what was said within the community, and they were highly respected. You know, they were taken care of, they were cared for, and everybody in any society had their roles. The men went out and hunted. You had potters. You had individuals that fished. So everybody had a function in the society, and everybody contributed to the good of the society.
Right. I'd like yeah, here I go, echoing again. Sorry. If there's a way you could explain, there's something interesting that I always found interesting. A lot of the words that people use today don't realize they're Taino. Simple words. And if you could explain something on that part, like our everyday English language that we use, or Spanish language, there are certain words that have come from us and people don't realize it came from the Taino themselves.
There's a lot of words that came from our ancestors, from the Taino culture. You think of hurricane, huracan.
Mm-hmm.
So hurricane didn't exist in Europe. There were no hurricanes down there, but they were in the Caribbean. Mm-hmm. You know, so canoes, canoa, hamaca, hammock. Mm-hmm. There's one that I remember, which was I think it was guagua.
Yeah.
And we always knew guagua as a bus, but then we realized that guagua meant to them a mode of transportation that housed many individuals. Yeah. And then later on, we learned in the Spanish to say guagua for a bus when we saw a bus, and then we adopted that name for what was a bus.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of words that come from that have enriched not only the English language, but the Spanish as well.
Yeah. Yeah, like barbecue.
Barbecue.
That's another one.
In Taino, it's barbacoa.
Right. So it's interesting to see how some of these things people don't know on every day, that they're influences of the Taino people,
right?
That are still here today. So I guess moving forward, if you want to say, you know, you were talking about your journey and the Cacike, the tribe, if you could speak a little bit more on that.
So the tribe came to be, and we stayed dormant for about 3 years because we wanted to learn, educate ourselves. We wanted that the moment that we opened up those doors, we could provide something that was of quality to the community, and that we would have enough that we could really educate the public on the Taino culture.
Right.
So after 3 years, we opened up our doors. We started doing full moon ceremonies every month to honor Mother Earth, and we kept on introducing art, artifacts, instruments, comics that were Taino influenced, coins that were made with Taino symbols on it. We have even playing cards.
Yeah.
So and many people will say, well, why is that in the museum? Well, the reason it's in the museum is because now you can see the influence that the Taino people had in our geographic location, but not only that, but in the Americas. When you talk about the Americas, you're not just talking about North America, you're talking about South America as well. You know, when people think about America, they think of the United States, but that's not America. America is the whole continent, the North and the South. That is the Americas.
Right.
Well, you gave me some pictures, Lacrosse, and I want, since we were just talking about the artifacts in the museum, I just thought we would bring some of these up, like this particular one. Is there a name for that?
This one would be represented of a shaman that is in the sitting position and is in prayer. You know, there are some that if they have tear ducts that come down, they're similar, but the one with the tear ducts that comes down, so where you see the eyes, you would have some tears coming. That would represent Boinael, which is the spirit of rain. And then you would have Morahu, which is the spirit of the dry spell. And the reason they had those two spirits was because, you know, sometimes it rained too much. So they would have to say, okay, Boinael, we're going to have to tie you up and we're going to have to pray to the spirit of dry weather so that we can dry up the land and we can continue having good crops. You're going to see one that could be, it's two Beh-HEE-kehs sitting back to back. But when you look at them, one is a male and one is a female. All right. And one of the things that was very prevalent in the Taino culture was duality, male and female. So when you see a figure like that, that one is saying that both exist. And then, you know, as we go further into the aspects of a Beh-HEE-keh, which is the spiritual leader of the community, there will be some correlation between the function of the Beh-HEE-keh being able to walk in both realms.
Absolutely.
Wow, that's really interesting. I think it's really special for people that are, you know, two-spirit and maybe, like, I'm not sure what this one is.
This is
I know that these are.
And this is the sacred chair of the chief. So whenever they went into ceremony, there were only two individuals that could sit in that seat, and that was the chief or the Beh-HEE-keh. And they would sit there when they needed to commune with the spirits, so that they could get answers to some possible questions that they may have, or so that they could journey and retrieve information from our ancestors. And they would sit on that duho doing a ritual, which is called the Cohoba ritual. And the Cohoba is a mixture of the Cohoba with tobacco, and they chew that, and that allows them to go into a hallucinogenic state so that they can talk to the ancestors to retrieve information.
Do you know if it was tobacco that they were chewing? Like, did they use any other substances? Like, I know like there's ayahuasca down in Central America. I don't know if they have that in Puerto Rico or not.
No, it was just a coba tree, tobacco, and they would chew on it so that they could that would be the sacred herb that they would use.
Wow. Okay. Cool. Now here's another picture.
That's a mayoacan. So if you look in the center, you'll see a slit, right? It's like right in the center, there's a slit there. So there's two tongues. There's the right and the left, and then when you hit one side, it has one tone. Hit the other side, it has another tone. The mayoacan was considered. It was associated with the masculine aspects, and it was also associated with the frog of Puerto Rico. So the frog of Puerto Rico would go coqui, coqui, and when you hit the drum, you would hear tutu, 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 mimicking the frog from Puerto Rico.
Oh, I love those frogs. Those frogs, like, I love it. I sleep so much better when there's croaky frogs around. I love them. They're all over Hawaii and Pacifica.
Yeah, that's so funny because that wasn't supposed to happen. They took them over because there was a shift in Puerto Rico, and now over there they're a bother in Hawaii. They're like, we got to get rid of these frogs.
Oh, are you kidding?
Yeah.
I love to hear them. I absolutely love to hear it. It's like
but I think they hurt some of their native species. Hawaii is a very sensitive environment for an island. I imagine Puerto Rico might have been too, because gosh knows what creatures we've lost, right? So we've lost cultures, so I'm sure we've lost creatures too. So here's another. This looks like an instrument.
That's a mayoacan also, and that's actually an art piece on the wall. It's made out of bambua, which is another Taino name, bambua. And the figure that you see there is the supreme being Atabe, the motherly figure, Mother Earth, the serpent mother, and when we do the full moon ceremony, we're celebrating the 28-day cycle of the full moon, which coincides with the 28-day menstrual cycle of the female.
So yeah, she birthed creation. I think it was. She birthed it.
Well, she birthed Yokahu, which is her son. She had twins. One was Yokahu, one was Guacar. And Guacar and Yokahu had different responsibilities. They had different purpose. Yokahu created life, created the trees, created the birds, all of that. Guacar is kind of like the Lord of Destruction. But more with Guacar is he is the Lord of Hard Knocks. So when something isn't right, he comes in, tears it down so that it can be rebuilt again and rebuilt the correct way. The same way with lessons in life. If you didn't learn your lesson, Guacar comes and slaps you in the face, sends you to the back of the line, and says, let's see what happens when you get back up here again. See if we're going to have to send you to the back of the line again because you haven't learned your lessons.
Right.
And that's really what Guacar does. Guacar is not a bad entity, and people try to look at it as a bad entity, but he's not. He has a purpose.
Right.
Sounds a lot like Saturn.
Yeah, it's like an adversary trying to teach you, like a sparring partner. Learn to duck or you're going to get hit.
Hey, and sometimes, like, I mean, it reminded me when you were speaking of it, of Saturn in astrology, which kind of does the same thing. If you haven't dealt with things when it comes into play for your astrology chart, Saturn is the one where you're like, oh my God, or things start to happen if you didn't take care of them, if you didn't listen to your heart or whatever it was. So, all right, so let's go here. This is an interesting picture.
So that is that really talks is a picture that's at the center, and it was created by my mentor. His name is Miguel Sagay, and he is the one who initiated me as a Beh-HEE-keh, and that art piece he started at the center. And if you look at the figure towards to the right of the female, that is representative of Atabe. And when you look at her, she's always represented as giving as pregnant and ready to give birth. The same as the female that you see is like an earthly example of the femininity. The hoop that you see behind there, that hoop is called the Goa. And it is also representative of Atabe, and it's the serpent mother. It's hard to see in that picture, but if you had a real Goa, those Goas are made of stone, and one piece of it is the head, and the other, and then you'll see that the tail is going into the mouth of the serpent. This also represents the uterus. And again, you look at the left, you see the sun. At the right, you see the moon, representing that the sun gives us light during the day, the moon gives us light at night. So the moon is called Karaya.
Right.
Wow, I think it's very interesting all of the different, how so many different paths can see things like kind of similarly, like how the moon is feminine and represents, sort of that. And I just, the sacred feminine and even the sacred masculine both. And so, that makes me go, oh, what happened to everybody else? That's not binary, and I know they existed. So can you tell us a little bit? So they definitely had a lot of things to honor the divine feminine, and they of course honored the divine masculine, right? We've seen some tools and instruments that represented that. And what about everybody else?
Well, now that you asked that question, I can answer that. So Atabe is there's this entity, a spirit called Yaya Gwa Too Ee Ree. Yaya means spirit of spirit. Today is the sky. All right. So Yaya is neither male nor female. And how does Yaya come to be? Well, Yaya is the emergence of Atabe and Yokahu together to create Yaya Gwa Too Ee Ree. Then there's a term that's called Marokoti. Marokoti means neither male nor female.
So that would be the more non-binary.
Then when you think
that again,
that would be the non-binary, basically the one who doesn't identify as either. You have the ones that identify as one or the other, or one that or the identifying as both, and then you have the one that identifies as neither. So it's almost like three genders, I guess, or no, male, female, two spirit, and then none. So I guess that would be four representations of gender.
Right. And when you think about the Beh-HEE-kehs, when they're in ceremony, we have the ceremony that is more male driven, and we have the ceremony that's more female driven. And it's only because of the cycles and how they land that it's done that way. But the Beh-HEE-keh is the only person that can do either role. So if there's no male Beh-HEE-keh to do the male part, a female can do it, because that Beh-HEE-keh is considered to have both essence, the male and the female. So they can. So if a female is in a male ceremony, that female can take on the role of the male during the ceremony. But they're the only ones that can do it because they are emulating both the male and the female.
And vice versa.
Correct.
Oh wow, I keep echoing bad.
Yeah, try to get close to it. I think that might have something to do with it, Lacrosse.
I'm gonna
If
see
you
if
get close to your mic.
My...
I was just thinking.
Okay.
I was just thinking as you were saying that, like thinking about ceremony and indigenous tribes. And one of my favorite questions is, did they have a sweat lodge or something like a sweat lodge? Like, did they go into like a cave and pray, or what did their rituals look like?
They had what's called a Kah-SEE. So a lot of people would say, oh, well, they're in the Caribbean. Why would they want to do a sweat lodge? Well, the sweat lodge is predominantly so because in the Taino view, the female goes through a normal purification process. Every month, their body cleanses itself out, and they go through that process. Whereas they consider that the man doesn't have that. The way that the man can is to go to the sweat lodge, which we call the Kah-SEE, so that they can go in and they can get purified. We don't have that stigma where if a woman is in her cycle that she can't go into the Kah-SEE. We don't believe in that.
Right. So it's definitely a different type of. Now, Kah-SEE, does it look similar to a sweat lodge? Like what?
The Kah-SEE works very similar to a sweat lodge. There are cycles that you go through. There are differences with the Taino Kah-SEE, with prayers that are said, with songs that are sang, but it's pretty much called the New Moon Ceremony, which is only for the women. So as far as the Kah-SEE, no, but they do have a ceremony, which is a New Moon ceremony, which is geared towards the women, so that those what you just spoke of could happen.
Yeah, they would like. This is where the red tent movement kind of came from. Tried to include everyone's perspective, but that's sort of what it's based on, is that people kind of come together to share their wisdom about the hormonal changes that happen naturally to people with ovaries. So
there's also a story that we have where when Wahayona, which was a chief who had stolen the women, and put all the women in this island called Matinino, which is where the Amazonians came from. So these women came from Matinino, left the island, and went to South America. Hence, that's where you get that story of the Amazonians.
Yeah, I think I've read a little bit about the Amazonian women, just because I think it's fascinating. That even though in some cultures women were oppressed, I hear that Taino didn't oppress their women, but some cultures, even in some tribes, women were seen different. But I wonder about that, like what that was like for two spirit people. That did they allow? Because the big question is like trans women being able to be in women's spaces. And I wonder, did they allow the feminine people with a penis into those special circles that were just for women?
Well, I think that back then, yes, but as colonialism impacted and European mentality started impacting, you saw that they were shamed into not doing it anymore. And after them being shamed, eventually they adopted it and thought that that shame was the shame, when in reality it was not. It was an imposed shame by the colonizers. Today, we have adopted that if you have somebody who identifies themselves as a male or a female, they can attend the ceremonies, so that we're welcoming and open to that. And actually, it never becomes. I know in our tribe, the Yucayeke Manicato, it's never even a topic of conversation. It's like, oh, okay, great, nice to have you, and that's how we look at it. We don't really. I've always been an individual, and I can only speak for myself that I see you, and that's all I see is you.
And that's important when you go into a tribe, because some people they come to this tribe for a safe space, feeling, because walking the two worlds, because we live in a society where it's so technically unacceptable, because once you get, like you said, the colonized mentality, it's nice to know that there are safe spaces out there where you can go and be the two spirit that you were born, or the Maracoti, whatever it is that you choose to be, or what, not choose to be, but whatever it is that you're called to be, So.
Well, I wanted to show this comment here. So this person is saying that they didn't know anyone else knew about their culture. And I'm like, oh, and it sounds like they're very excited. So
yeah,
I'm glad that you're reaching out and letting people know. And this person says, hello, hi, Tammy, welcome. And our friend Sandy is here. Sandy loves to come and learn at Rainbow Soul. Welcome, Sandy.
yeah.
So, and fantastic. Well, I think that, that the different indigenous cultures had a lot of different perspectives that are sort of crossed over. Some of the other things I notice are crossed over are not just gender stuff, but like the directions and the elements that go with it. Do you know, like, are there elements with the directions? Does Taino honor the elements and the directions?
Our directions are tied to we call them the cardinal points. So it's north, south, east, west. Actually, we start at the south,
Right.
because we're always looking to the south, to the Caribbean, because that's where we came from. So we start at the south, then we move to the west, the north, and the east. Attached to those are colors. And there we also have the sacred birds. And attached to each one of those points is the sacred foods. If you want to talk about stones, we have 28 stones that represent uh, the 28 cycles of the moon. As far as crystals or anything like that, I don't know that they did or did not, because there's a lot of information that's still missing. But I don't know if I answered your question.
Well, that's very interesting. It's okay. We're just having a discussion about the way the different like things that kind of cross over in a lot of tribes and a lot of spiritual paths. And so let's talk about like Puerto Rico's landmass. Like there's a volcano there, right? So they probably had a lot of different types of stones and things like that, right?
Yes, they do.
So
there's a lot of necklaces that are made of the stones. Amulets are made of them. So yes, they do use them. We do use them.
I think the whole point is we're basically speaking like, what would be the representation of each of the points? Like, I know the east is the red-tailed hawk.
The south is the turkey. All right. A lot of people think the turkey as a dumb animal, but it's not. It's a very intelligent animal. But the turkey it represents the freedom of the obstruction of prejudice and preconceptions. And when you think of that term, that's very powerful. Free from the obstruction of prejudice and preconceptions. And each cardinal point has a virtue that allows you to continue the cycle, so that you constantly grow and you reach a point where when you get to the east, that is the representation of the red-tailed hawk, where now you can see past your own self. You can see with that far-sighted vision, but it's like cycle.
I think the one thing I do remember learning was that they said the whole objective is to get to the middle, where you have each of these elements, you know, like the north is wisdom, the north is childlike, like a childlike mentality, the south is wisdom, old age, you know, seeing far, seeing near, within, and being able to get to a place in the middle where you are balanced in all these four areas. So sometimes having the totems or the birds help you. It's kind of like remembering, okay, this animal represents this. I got to remember to be humble. I got to remember to be like this. This animal represents that, and always trying to seek that balance. I mean, if I'm correct, because it's been a while. It's been a while.
It is true.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So
that's interesting because that actually shows up a lot in like you know, in witchcraft and in a lot of other pagan spiritual paths. Almost all, and most of them are sort of Celtic based, like from Ireland and stuff. And we kind of have like the same thing. Certain animals represent certain things. The directions usually represent the elements: earth, air, fire, water. But you know, and in that we do try to get to the middle to balance all of those, and that's the divine, or the divine within each of us, or however we see the divine. So like I think, but you guys have numerous gods, or is there one divine being and then numerous gods? You got it.
Well, I want to see if I can answer your question earlier a little bit clearer. When you talk about the elements come up in the stories. So when you talk about Bayabalako, who was a shaman who had learned the secret of fire comes up. When you talk about Atabe, the cosmic mother, but she's Mother Earth, the earth comes up. So when you think of Gwa Too Ee Ree, the sky comes up.
Yeah, the air.
When you think of Buenael, with the rain, the water, he comes up. So it doesn't really come up in the way we are used to seeing it. It comes up differently, but it's there. It's just not looked at the same way.
So talking about the gods and the difference between gods and semis, I think it's imperative that people know, because sadly, when the conquest happened, they felt that the indigenous people worshipped all these different gods, and that was not anywhere near even close to the case. So if you want to elaborate more on that.
Well, we have what's called semis, and these semis, these spirits, allowed us to explain life and how it occurs. It also helped us to come up with our stories of creation. It helped us to explain different things. You think of the frog. The Taínos were so complex that they understood the concept of a molecule through the frog because of all the eggs. So when they laid eggs, they knew that there was something even smaller, such as a molecule. And that's the only way I can explain it, is that they had these different beings that represented different things, these spirits that represented different things, and explained things so that the community could have a better understanding of life in general and spirituality.
Right. And you would, because I know, like myself, I'd like to consider it more like a manifestation, since they didn't always have words to say, okay, this is science or this is that. Like they didn't have the word molecule. So, but when you think about that, and they had that concept and they understood the concept, here they had to create these ways of understanding. Although be it today, we may look at it primitive, it's just their way of expressing that manifestation on how they see it. So, yeah.
And wouldn't it also be like, I mean, in my opinion, and maybe it's because I'm an environmentalist, maybe it's because I'm a witch, that the indigenous people, and I think this happens to a lot of modern day pagans, is that especially us that are from the white, we're white, we don't really know what our culture is, really, to be honest. Most of us don't really know. Some of us think we might know. And it's because I think the tribes were trying to stay in harmony with nature. They believed that there was a balance between the human experience and even the divine experience and nature. And I think that's actually something that we've lost. Not only do we lose cultures and tribes, but we mostly lost it to colonialism and Christianity. Christianity definitely, they did this to the Celts in Europe, and then they came over and started doing it to the indigenous tribes, essentially saying that we were wrong by harmonizing with nature because we were using like magic or whatever, whatever their prejudice was. And I'm just saying that I think I'm sure the Taino culture was trying to live in harmony with that volcanic. I'm sure at some point that volcano erupted, and I know Hawaii's got its stories around the volcano. I'm sure you all have stories around your volcano, eh?
Well, we have stories more about huracan, the hurricanes, which were more of a worry to the Taínos than the volcano. Um, and I'm sure maybe the tremors are happening in Puerto Rico this past year. They had hundreds of tremors that occurred. Uh, but when you talk about being in harmony with the earth, the Taínos only took what they needed and nothing more. Everything was for the community, and there was no concept of owning land or this is mine, and everybody partook in the benefits of whatever the earth had to give, and they were very reverent in making sure that they were not wasteful. When you think about the manatee, which for the Taínos that's our sacred cow, you know. So when they took a manatee, not one bit of it was wasted. Even the ribs, they made uh, ceremonial spatulas, where they're called purging sticks, and they would make purging sticks out of the ribs, and they would use it in ceremony. You know, so it was always being mindful of not taking too much and also giving back. So if you take, you plant.
100%. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. I was just
Yeah.
about to say, and I think that that's something that the entire human race has lost, regardless of what land you lived on. I think we've all lost that, and like Tammy is saying, is that the vibrations with nature, like I know that I don't know if this is true for Taino tribe, but I know that other tribes when they started experimenting with medicine, the medicine people would tune into the vibrations of the plant. They would literally like sit there and meditate. And if you've ever done that before, that's actually an interesting experience because that's how they would receive information and then they would try the medicine or not. Then they would decide what they wanted to do with said plants, especially if they didn't know what it was for.
There's a story that we have where a person from one tribe, miles away, would go to a tree and they would whisper to that tree. Miles away would be the recipient, where they'd be able to take that energy that was whispered to them and they'd be listening to the tree and get the message.
Mm-hmm.
So when you talk about energy and vibration, the Tainos were very in tune with that.
That just reminds me, the movie Avatar
Yes.
was based on the conquest down there. And if any, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Avatar, not The Last Airbender, actually Avatar, the blue people in outer space. There's a point where they connect to the trees, and the trees are all interconnected. It's like this big nervous system. And it's so funny because there's so much information that we don't have about the Taínos, but that was one of the information. They considered it like a nervous system. They all interconnected through nature. And like he was saying, they would talk to the tree, and the tree would carry that message to the next village. That's like, to even fathom that happening today is unreal. It's just unreal.
When you think about the sacred tree, our sacred tree is the ceiba tree.
Yeah, the ceiba tree.
That's our sacred tree.
Mm-hmm.
And until today, it's our sacred tree, and we protect it because it means so much to our culture. The only time you can make anything out of a ceiba tree is if it falls on its own.
Mm-hmm.
And when that piece is made, that piece becomes sacred.
Yeah, that much is true. That much I've definitely heard. And it's like actually illegal to cut it down.
Yeah, you can't cut the ceiba tree.
You cannot cut a tree down, a ceiba tree in Puerto Rico. It is illegal.
Yeah. The other sacred tree is the jojoba tree.
Yeah, the jojoba tree. Yeah.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And that's exactly what I'm talking about here. Here's a person. If you hug a tree during a thunderstorm, you can actually feel it kind of throbbing.
Yeah.
That's true.
I don't know if I would do that. I'd be too scared to get electrocuted. I said, that would be my luck. It gets struck by lightning. That would be my luck.
I'm kind of with you across. I kind of go in. And yeah, that's the stuff that's happening. We're going to take a quick break. This is so much fun. When we come back, if I don't have a dream in the chat room, I have a dream for you across.
Oh, boy.
I had just the other day. Totally funny and crazy and weird. And I think you were a character in it, Lacrosse. So anyway.
Oh no.
Anyway, so here we go. We're gonna take a little break.
All right.
WLFE-DB Radio has LGBTQ shows like Across the Pond, Rainbow Soul, Everything Yet Nothing, and Inside the Drag Closet. Check out the schedule on WLFE-DB.com. You can even watch them on TV at WLFE-DB.com under LGBTQ Friends, right off our website. Again, it's WLFE-DB.com for your LGBTQ shows and more.
WLFE-DB.com, where talk radio is a whole lot better. Our shows are your shows, and that there makes for a great talk radio.
Oh, that was quick.
Welcome back. Welcome back. I need some more commercials. I need one from your show next, Lacrosse.
Oh, yeah, I got to make one. I've been so slacking on that. I have been just slacking.
I know it's a lot of work, but you can put yourself one together, and I'm trying to put one together for Candy Brings Plenty.
Oh, nice.
We'll get there. I
was on smoke break.
It's okay. I think it's beautiful, the whole, internet thing, because people can have their smoke or their drink or whatever.
I know, right? While it's happening.
And it no longer interrupts us. So I think it's totally awesome. So here's the weird dream I had. Okay, it's totally weird. I woke up in a little bit of like, oh my fucking God. Like I woke up, I was frustrated. Okay. And the reason I was frustrated is because so first I was supposed to be going to some sort of special event that you're supposed to, get dressed up for. And I couldn't find something. So I'm not really sure why, like if it wouldn't fit me or if there was just not enough choices. I'm not sure why, but I couldn't find something that fit me. So I ended up choosing Batman pajamas. Okay. Like a Batman top and a Batman pants. And they were like totally like, like Marvel comic pajamas, like for an 8-year-old.
Like underoos.
They were big enough for me. They were big enough for me. And so here I am, and I'm at this place, and everybody's getting ready. And I think one of the characters was you, and you were like, "Yeah, look, I got this outfit." And I was like, "Oh, that's awesome!" And you had this great suit on. It was like not quite purple. It was like this really awesome color. You had a great shirt on, and I was like, "Oh man, I don't know about what I got, you guys. I want to show you what it is." And so then I'm like looking all over, and I can't find what I just got, the Batman pajamas. I can't find them, and I can't find them. I can't find them. I can't find them. And then finally, somebody says, "I think you're wearing the pants." And I look down, and I'm wearing the pants, but then I can't find the shirt, which I just had. And then I am looking for the shirt, and I can't find it, and I get mad, and I wake up. So I'm glad I woke up, because
you
I
were
was
mad about
kind of
the shirt.
pissed off because I couldn't find stupid ass Batman pajamas.
But were you wearing a shirt?
Yeah, I was wearing a shirt, but I was going to try it on and show everybody.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
What's a special event? Let me see.
Like a dance or something like that. It was some sort of special event.
Really, like the special event doesn't stand out as much to me, but I know you did recently have an anniversary.
I did.
So, I don't know. I mean, that could just be like residue. It could be residue, but what stands out is like you were wearing the PJ pajamas, and I think that has a lot to do with your inner child. Just going back to that inner child, because here I am with this suit on, and you're like, "Oh my God, that's so great," but but I got this, and then just the frustration of knowing, okay, I had this and now it's gone. Sometimes we battle with it, we have that inner child, but we'll lose it, and we'll just have pieces of that inner child or that innocence in us. And then it is frustrating, and you do get angry because sometimes we don't like being grown up. Sometimes we don't like the adult life. And to me, I just get that that's just you like still holding on real hard to that inner child and that innocence and that purity that you just so desperately want to hold on to. And sometimes you lose it. And I think you get frustrated or you get angry because you don't want to lose any of that. You want to hold on to that. I mean, that's what I'm getting from the dream. I
think it has something to do with the hormone problem that I'm having. The hormones are out of whack. I was sick too, so I was not feeling good.
That could be it. But I mean,
it's very frustrating to me. The whole thing is frustrating.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, but like I said, since they were underoos, it's like that's the first. Well, like pajamas, like that's the first thing I get is that inner child, like where you see kids, but they got the coolest pajamas. We don't. But that's basically what I get from it is just holding on to that inner child.
Yeah, I imagine it probably had something. I do feel like I'm aging, and that's what's going on. My hormonal aging experience is what's happening to me right now, but I can't change it, and it's frustrating. So I do feel like I'm losing a piece of myself. So I think you got it there. See, I knew if I brought it to you, you'd be able to help me figure that out. Completely crazy Batman pajamas.
I've been having crazy dreams myself. But I think I know a lot of people who've been having crazy dreams and like suffering from a lot of like headaches and things. Like, I don't know what's going on with the moon or what's going on with the solar system, but like even myself, I've been having crazy dreams, lots of headaches, lots of agitation,
I wonder about your astrology chart immediately. So what's actually happening right now is that Pluto went retrograde a little bit ago. So Pluto the last time Pluto went retrograde, we got COVID. So Pluto rarely does this, but it's happening again right now, and it will be going on, I think, until the fall. And right now, everybody's experiencing computer problems and tech problems is because Mercury is in shadow, and will be there until the end of June. So that has a lot to do with it. Astrology is a beautiful way of looking at the stars. Hey, we should bring our guest back on because I'm wondering, I'm sure that Taino looked at the stars.
Yes.
Sure they looked at the stars. All right. Welcome back.
Thank you.
So we brought up the stars. I'm sure Taino tribes, they had to look up at the sky, right?
Yes,
they had to see their beautiful stars.
Absolutely. But I was having computer problems today.
Yeah, it's so funny that when she mentioned that, I thought about you right away.
I was like, oh, now I know why this thing wasn't working. But yes, they looked very much at the stars. They understood. They were able to tell the seasons from the stars. They looked at the moon, at the sun. They looked at the Pleiades constellation. They looked at the Milky Way, and they were very aware of it. They used it for navigating.
Right.
They were able to navigate the oceans with following the stars. So, and in fact, our ceremonies are driven based on seasons.
Yeah. I think just like all the others. Yeah. Well, speaking of the traveling, since they did, like, they were considered pretty much the explorers, because they, like, there has been stories about them getting as far up as New York. I think they had found some petroglyphs in a cave up in New York that were actually Taino, from what I had heard. And also down south, there were certain tribes that considered the Taínos cousins, you know. So I don't know, like they were really, they didn't just hit Maya, but I had heard that they had gotten as far as Georgia, Florida, even as far up north as New York. Now I don't know how the petroglyphs got there, because they didn't just trade wares, they trade marriage, intermarriage.
They had petroglyphs in Georgia, and so they actually found petroglyphs in Georgia. My assumption of that is that there probably was very small migration, maybe individuals that married into other tribes and brought part of their artwork or their pottery, and that's where it became existent. I don't know that they traveled as a group all the way up there, but I'm sure that, you know, as they interacted with the Mayan culture, they acted with the culture in Florida. Those individuals probably did create pieces that they left there. And I think that that's as much of the influence that I see happening with the Taino culture.
Right. When I was in New Orleans, I had spoke to someone there, and they had said that the Taino were actually, because they call Louisiana the tip of the Caribbean, and they said there was actually even Taino influence there, because they were talking about some of the indigenous tribes that were there, and I asked them, you know, since it's so close, you know, and they're like, oh no, we're the tip of the Caribbean. And I said, well, do you feel that there was some influence? And they're like 100%. I am sure that they were sure that there was influence of Taino culture there. So yeah, they were pretty interesting explorers. So that's why going with the stars, I mean.
How about in Central America, like Costa Rica, Venezuela, Mexico?
Absolutely. Predominantly, most likely, the biggest influence was where we came from, which was Argentina, Venezuela. You know, you even find Colombia, those areas where, you know, they migrated, and it was a path that they followed all the way up. It was funny because there was this huge debate about deer. Oh, that's not Taino. We don't have deers. And then lo and behold, we dig into the archives and we find deers.
Wow.
So it wasn't such a northern thing. My guess is that they probably brought them down. Did you know that there's deer in Puerto Rico?
No,
Yes, there's
I
deer.
had no idea.
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
But
That's
again,
fascinating.
we we don't understand that. We think about migration, and we think it in terms of today. No, but that migration was happening back then. You know, and people were interacting. We found the tooth of a jaguar in Puerto Rico. We know there's no jaguars in Puerto Rico. How did the jaguar tooth get there? Oh, it got through trade and commerce.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
Maybe from a place like the Tico culture in Costa Rica, because there are some things that I've learned about just from going to Costa Rica so many years. You start to learn about the Tico, culture there, and jaguars not unusual there. And I'm just like, thinking about the distance from Puerto Rico to Costa Rica, pretty darn close. I could totally see them going back and forth and trading and cooperating and maybe even coming from there. I could see that, Costa Rica's right there.
Yeah.
So, and Puerto Rico is kind of a jungle type of island, right?
In
the
time, yes. In the time, yes. It was very mountainous, a lot of trees, densely with vegetation. So I would definitely say that it would mimic the jungle.
I mean, we do have a rainforest.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a rainforest there that's still also heavily protected. El Yunque. So that makes sense that it would be very, very dense.
Yeah, because Costa Rica is all rainforest too. Yeah. So I'm sure that they had a lot in common or even related in some way, like cousins or something. So yeah. So I mean, but let's talk about what's going on today, like with Puerto Rico. There now it's a bit of a city, right? And
well, the city is the city, and the country is still the country. When you think about the mountainous areas, as we continue, I had stated that a lot of people from the island are reaching out to their indigenous roots and inquiring more about it. There's this group that's called Taino 101, and in that group they have about, I would say, over 7,000 followers. And there's another one that's called Taino Education, and every day I'm seeing somebody else pop in there. Oh, I just found out. I want to know. I want to learn. Can you guide me? Can you show me? Can you teach me? What books should I read? And I find it very intriguing that it's like even after 500 years, you just can't wipe it out of us. As hard as the colonizers tried to do that, they weren't able to stifle us and take our identity away.
And I think it's a struggle. It's a long battle still yet. I mean, we still have a huge battle on trying to get, like I said, get written back in the history books for them to stop stating that we're extinct. Getting some, not so much recognition, but at least validation and understanding that we still are here. I think that's the biggest struggle that we are having, because they're still not acknowledging that the Taínos exist, at least. But the last census, I think there was a lot more people writing in that they were Taino this last time, and before it wasn't in there. So enough people writing it in is going to force them to have to start acknowledging that the Taínos still exist. So.
But they get caught up with the argument of, well, you're not full-blooded Taino. No, I am a descendant.
Right.
And that's all you need to know, is that I am a descendant of Taino.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was about to say, who's they? Who says that Taino doesn't exist? Is that like educational book?
it's how the history has been written, because remember that history is written by the conqueror. They decide how the history is going to be formulated. So the conquerors wrote us out of the books. Columbus was glorified, but people don't realize that he was the Hitler of the 1400s. You know, and who would want to give accolades to an individual who created so many atrocities, or was the catalyst for so many the extinction of so many cultures? You know, so I think until people get to the point where they really want to hear the truth, is when people will start realizing that they've been fed lies.
Yeah.
And sometimes the truth hurts.
And I think that's that constant battle that we just got to keep pushing. Just got to keep pushing it.
You guys have a cultural center there, right, in Lancaster?
Yeah.
So tell us about that. What happens there? What do you do? What happens? I know there's a museum there, right?
Well, we have gone to schools, participated in educational pieces. We've gone to colleges. We do something that's called Atabe 360, where every month we would go out and clean the streets. Actually, the street is named. We've adopted the street, so you'll see the name of the tribe at the end of the street, Yucayek and Manicato. We are high on teaching people the truth, you know, and the beauty of our culture, and how you think of the Taínos and how much of an influence they had in the world, you know. So we do spend time teaching. We do our ceremonies there. Pre-COVID, we used to do it every month. After COVID, we had to shut it down, but we're at the verge of reopening again, starting our ceremonies, and just really educating people.
That's the key. Because
how can somebody, if they want to join or learn more or come be part of a ritual, how can they get in touch?
Well, they can go to the Facebook page, Cacike Manicato, and they can go in there, and they ask the administrator there. His name is Rafi Torres, and he will make appointments for people to go and see. Let's see. Let me see if I can type it.
Well, Lacrosse type it. Is that .com Lacrosse?
That's on Facebook. That's how it's shown on Facebook.
Oh, okay. So they can like do pound with that word?
Yeah.
Okay, so let me try to put that up here. Okay.
So if they go to Facebook, they can go in there and they'll get accepted. And then if they want to have a tour, they just set it up with the Kina of our tribe, and that the Kina is the voice of our tribe. He will do his very best to set up a day where he can open up the doors and let them go in, and he'll give them a personal tour himself.
Mm-hmm. And he's very informative on all, like on most, not all, but on most of the matters.
There we go.
There we go. Yep, that's it.
So yeah, and you guys have a museum there with some educational things. So like if someone had a class or a group or something like that, that was majority, you know, from Puerto Rican people, Taino Puerto Rican people, would that you would take a small group, right? Like a small class?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. We've done that before. We have videos that we place. We have a monitor that we show videos, educational pieces. We have the artifacts that have little cards that explain what that artifact is, where it came from, artwork, anything that has influence that has Taino influence on today we put it in there.
Mm.
A lot of artwork. A lot of artwork.
Yeah, a lot of our
Okay, and let me just spell that out loud for those just listening to the audio stream. It's pound. You could just search on Facebook for this. You could just type in the search Yukayekeemanicato. So you could type that in, and then you can get connected and send a message and reach out, because I think harvesting our cultures is one of the best things you could do. So what about people that are like me, that are allies, that, we're not, I don't think I'm from Puerto Rico, although sometimes I wonder, because I'm constantly, like, I grew up in a neighborhood with a large population of people, Puerto Rico, and then I went to Standing Rock and camped right next to the Taino tribe, and La Crosse is my drag, and I'm like, wow, I don't know why Taino keeps coming up in my world, but anyway, what can we do to help for allies? What can we do?
Well, they're called datiaos. And a datiao is somebody that gets adopted into the Taino culture. So we have datiaos in our tribe that are that we consider brothers and sisters. But the one thing that I wanted to clarify is that being a Taino is not just Puerto Rican.
Mm.
It's Haitian, it's Cuban, it's Dominican, it's Jamaican, it's from Bahamas, it's from Bermuda, it's Bermuda, yeah, I think so. Aruba, I can't tell you how many times Aruba is never spoken of, but I've been there numerous times and I see the artwork and stuff like that. In fact, one of my, I had a bracelet that has the design of the cardinal points made from the caves in Aruba. So it expands quite a lot. When you talk about Taino in general, there's a lot of different islands that become a part of that. So, if anybody's listening, we've used the term Puerto Ricans quite a few times, but I want them to understand that it's Dominicans, it's Cubans, it's Haitians, it's Jamaicans, it's all of that area.
Right. We just happen to be
sort of the whole Caribbean area.
Yes.
That whole,
right.
including, I don't know if that would include Costa Rica or not, because I definitely hung out on the Caribbean side of Costa Rica. I felt very much at home.
Yeah.
I'm sure there
beautiful
were
mindset.
influences. I'm sure there were influences.
No, definitely. Sorry, adjusting the headphones. They're hurting a little bit.
I understand. So like, I just like to talk about what people, why it's important for people to harvest the culture, because I definitely am bothered. My experience at Standing Rock practically made me cry. I talked about it last week. It did make me cry. It made my heart break right there as I listened to this young person describe how they didn't have a culture, how they didn't know where they were from, they didn't know the history of their culture because it was erased. I find that then people like Candy Brings Plenty, and you, and that is, it seems like there's a huge movement to bring it forward, to bring the culture forward. But what about cultural appropriation? Because that is also a thing where it's kind of like where BLM starts talking about white privilege. It's a privilege where I think, to be honest with you, I think white people have lost our culture, and we fail to see that. And then as a result, we cling on to anything that looks cool that passes by. So we're like, oh yeah, and because we are resonating with you know, the ideas of being connected to nature, of having divine feminine and honoring all genders, and having, you know, rituals and spiritual perspectives. And I think that that kind of creates a little bit of cultural appropriation. Do you guys, how do you feel about that cultural appropriation, if you know what I'm talking about? Where
I think you made a very interesting statement that you lost who you were. And the other part of that statement, I think, would be, and you created what you are now. You know, Europeans have indigenous people. They have an indigenous background. I think the disconnect is the passion to want to dig into your roots, listening to that internal DNA of yours, and trying to find out what is it that's resonating. You know, we've, you know, it's when I think of you talk about the Celtics, a very, very rich culture and very indigenous people, and you know, nobody talks about that. You know, I'm sure that if you look at different cultures, there are indigenous people, but nobody speaks of it. And I don't know why it resonates so much in us that we fight to regain that. It's important to us. If you don't know where you came from, how can you know who you are? That's tough, you know, and I didn't know where I came from, in the sense of I didn't know about my Taíno-ness, but I knew there was something in me that just was dying to find out. I was very uneasy and frustrated because every time I tried to open a door, it just seemed like the door was locked. And I kept on trying doors, and I kept on trying doors until eventually I found a door that opened. And I walked in, and I shut the door behind me, and I continued that search because it's so rich to me, you know. It's funny because I just finished a paper on gender and cultural diversity. And what's very interesting about that is that people who have been oppressed or who have experienced racial discrimination have learned to have a different quality of empathy and sympathy. I'm not saying that non-minorities don't have it, but it resonates so much in them because they're always looking back at what happened so that they don't do it to anybody else. You know, so they don't forget that. And I think it's the same thing as with culture. You look back to see, okay, what did I learn? You know, my grandmother, always planting outside, digging with the dirt. And my grandmother says, you know, I love plants. I just love plants. I love the dirt. I love the earth, you know? And I told you earlier that that's what I spent yesterday doing, is connecting to the earth, connecting to the things that I had learned from my grandparents and the stories that I heard from my grandparents. And, you know, you never realize it, but years later, that kicks in. And you start saying, man, if I could have talked to her even more, learned more from her, how great would that have been, you know? So I think that, yes, and I've thought of that often, that comment, that statement that you made. I think about that often. I was like, wow, what about their nativeness? What about their past? What about their culture, you know?
And I think, to interject here, I think the reason, because we're talking about cultural appropriation, I said I think the reason the draw is because of the lack of that connection. Because sadly, a lot of Europeans lost that connection to the earth. And I think They latch onto indigenous people or indigenous ways because they want to reconnect to that earth. So I don't know. I think cultural appropriation comes in is when it's not respected, and when a person will take on a culture that is not their own and will not do it with honor and respect. And I think that's the biggest problem. It's not so, because the truth is back hundreds of years ago, they would have adopted in somebody who wasn't born there. They would have adopted them into the tribe. That wouldn't have been considered cultural appropriation back then. You would have became a sibling. You're a part of the family now. And I think that's the difference, is that there's a difference between you saying, I resonate with that, but I don't want to offend. You would only offend if you didn't do it justice, and if you didn't speak and use your privilege to help the underprivileged, if that makes any sense, but I think cultural inappropriation is like the battles we're doing with now, people using indigenous people. Like tomorrow I'm going for that thing to make sure they take this mascot off. We're not mascots, we are people. And I think that's where the difference is. As long as you go in with respect and you honor, and you don't have to be flamboyant about it, but if somebody's willing to teach you and you're willing to learn and you can pass that on, you're just making a better world, at least in my opinion. I mean,
like the modern two-spirit
right.
identity. Some people even called me two-spirit in the pagan community, and I'm like, no, I wasn't raised on a reservation. I'm not indigenous. I'm just a white person. That's why I named my own path. That's
Right.
why I did that, divine androgyny. Because for me, the alchemy makes sense to me. And alchemy probably did come from like Europe somewhere, maybe Spain or something. But I think that what I noticed is that the indigenous cultures also want to be celebrated and held. So like my partner is an African drummer and has African stories and has even been to Africa. And that culture at the time, when they reached out to African Americans at the time, they weren't interested. So when a white person stepped up and said, well, I am, then they taught whoever was interested.
Yeah.
And I think I'm like, so now is she supposed to just not carry that on? I say, no, she needs to carry that on because it's kind of her job now.
Right, right, right.
It's funny because the same thing happened to us because, we were born here in the States. So we are considered individuals that had no country because we weren't accepted by the Puerto Ricans from the island because we weren't born there. It's funny because I was with a gentleman and we were going through the mountains of Utuado in Puerto Rico. And he started talking and putting out sayings that he didn't think I knew. Next thing you know, I'm sitting down here, hey, do you know this saying? Yeah. And then, oh, how about this one? You know that one? Yeah, I know that one too. And he goes, wait a minute. How did you know this? I said, because my parents taught me. And just because I didn't come from the island doesn't mean I don't feel like I'm from the island. I am from the island. I was not born here and I was raised all my life in the United States, but I learned everything, and he's like, yep, you are Puerto Rican, So we were considered, like I said, the people who didn't belong to the United States and we didn't belong to Puerto Rico. So we were considered to be in limbo.
Mm-hmm. And feel somewhat still, because we're technically not, we're Puerto Rico is it's a territory. It's not a state. So it's owned by the United States, but it's not a state of the United States. That's why we're saying we have no country.
So we conquered it. So the Americans conquered it. Why don't they just let y'all have your island?
Right. You know, and I think that's the whole point is like, and when you're born here, it's hard to be accepted from over there. But then even here, we're not accepted because we're from over there or our ancestors are from over there. So it's this double-edged sword, you know, and it just doesn't make any sense sometimes. And what are you going to do?
I know as a white person, I'm going to share this because I believe in truth speaking. As I was raised in a neighborhood that was very racially split, there was definitely a Black area and a white Polish area and a Puerto Rican area. And there was definitely racial BS that went on about Puerto Rican people as well as people of color. It didn't matter. They used mean words. I was often told to stay away, that it was, that they were bad people somehow. I wasn't very good at listening and no one really supervised me. So, I definitely was exposed to, I didn't have any parents, so I just kind of would get adopted by families, because no one was around to really watch me. So I would just like hang out with my friend and then go home with them for dinner. And the next thing you know, the mama was feeding me, and even wondering if my mom cared what time I came home. Those kinds of questions. Like, does it matter what time you go home? Don't you need to be home by dark? And oh, nobody cares, and and the next thing I know, I had a family that cared. And that was how I grew up. And I often ended up in homes that were rather low income, that sometimes probably had too many people in the house, 8, 10 people in a 2-bedroom house. And I was just one more. And so it was very interesting to me to be in a fairly middle class white family, yet spending most of my time with fairly low income families that were more open and present and loving to me than my own middle class family. And frankly, there were numerous Puerto Rican families that took me in and loved me just the way I was. It didn't matter what color my skin was, and several Black families too. So but I will say that I had to keep it a secret. So as a white person, as a white kid, I had to not tell my stepdad. Now, my mom wasn't racist, but my stepdad was. And I also had another caregiver that was quite racist. Right. So it does really exist, is what I'm saying. Is anyone out there that's questioning if this really exists? It really exists. It's quite obnoxious. And white people know it exists because they hear each other speaking it. It's just that there's this silence. We're not really sure what to say. And my advice on that is, if you're a white person and somebody says something that you're like, Puerto Rican people are just people, and you want to say that to them, but you don't know what to say, your racist uncle, you can instead say, I know some people that are Puerto Rican that are not that. And I think that you are making assumptions that are inappropriate. And you can just say that and leave it at that. You don't have to get into a big fight. You could just say that. So I'm going to say, as a white anti-racist activist for equality for all people, that now, if you've watched this show, you can say, I know for a fact that that's not true. Right. I'm sure that there are some people that suffer, that are in trouble with the law and things like that, but there are just as many white people that are in trouble with the law as there are Puerto Rican people and Black people. Most of us just want to pay our bills and live in peace and love each
other. It's so funny because, go ahead.
I remember one time somebody asked me, and said, "So what's your nationality?" American. No, your nationality. American. You know what I mean? No. Are you asking me about my heritage? Oh, I'm Puerto Rican. Really? You don't act like one. So my next statement was, well, tell me how to act so I can get it right.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I mean, it's just ignorance on people's point. But there's always a way to educate people and do it in such a way that they walk away thinking and really contemplating what they just did or what they just said.
I was gonna let Hollis know that's kind of like the whole like big family thing. Like there's this joke, after 3 kids, what's 1 more? What's 5 more? You know, when you have so many children, and we are used to living with big families, you know, and there's a beauty that comes with that, a sharing, a love, you know, a looking out for each other. You know, there's something that comes with having a big family. And like me, I only had my 4 kids. Next thing you know, this one kid moved in. I didn't even know he moved in. I go upstairs and I said, whose trash bags are these? And they're like, oh, that belongs to Chris. And I'm like, when the hell did Chris move in? Nobody even told me. The kid's been with me for like 10 years. He moved in when he was like 8, 9 years old. And I'm like, I can't believe this. So I've been taking care of this kid for 10 years, you know. And then at this point, you know, I got hooked up with my wife, and now here's another kid. It's just another kid. It's just, when you have so many, just keep them coming on. As long as they do the dishes, that's what we care about, you know.
Well, going back to what you had stated earlier about they were hospitable to you, they took you in, and that's how our grandmother raised us. Yeah. My grandmother, it was about hospitality. It was about giving the best of what you have to whomever walked in that door. I remember my grandmother would make this big pot of rice. I said, Grandma, it's only us. Oh, but you never know, somebody's going to come over. Mm-hmm. And I'd rather have a little bit of extra food just in case somebody comes over.
Yeah. It definitely was hospitality.
It's interesting that you say that, because now as an adult, I'm kind of like that. I'll make extra food, and if extra people, like my brother was visiting Colorado, and I was like, yeah, come on over. Yeah, bring your wife's family, sure. And it's like 7 people. And I'm like, okay. You know, like, I'm kind of laid back about it because that's how I was treated, you know, by numerous families. And they just welcomed me in, and I definitely did that too as a parent. If my son brought somebody home, I just treated them like they were my kid.
There was a quick story that Guatu and we were in Puerto Rico, and this just goes to show the difference of the mindset of here and of over there. I was eating something. I was eating something. I wasn't eating somebody. I'm not a Carib. Anyway, I was eating something. And somebody had told me, buen provecho, you know, like, to your health. And I immediately like, what the hell? What are you trying to say something to me? You know, you go back into that, like, real defensive. And he's like, hey, no, he really meant that. And I'm like, wow, how humbling that was. This isn't just about Taínos, Puerto Rico, or this is about a way of life that has been passed down from generation to generation. It's just, you know, and the Taínos were that way, passing it from generation to generation to generation. You treat people with hospitality. You give them from you. And no better story than the king or the Cacique that gave his crown to Columbus, and look at the mentality that he thought, oh, you're crowning me, the king. And he was like, no, I'm just giving you what's mine, and sharing that. And that's something that should be taken from the Taino, you know, like something to take away from them, that they were not called the noble people for nothing. So I just had to put that in.
It's interesting because when I stayed at Standing Rock, you know, we totally arrived at night. We had just driven down the red road. It's really intense in North Dakota. Okay, the Dakotas are a weird place to drive in. It just seems to go on forever. It's like Kansas. But anyway, when we finally got to Standing Rock, we drove down this road that was nothing but tribes flags up, and we just pulled over and parked in a spot for the night. And the next morning we got up, and I'm kind of usually the camp chef, and I'm trying to set up food. I'm not feeling real good, and I go over to the porta pots, and who am I camping next to but the Taino tribe, right? And so this guy introduces himself, and he's like, "Hey there, how are you? He's checking in. Did you guys just arrive? You guys must. I didn't see the stand here last night." And they're like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "Is it okay?" He's like, "Oh yeah." And then he's like, "Do you need help setting up camp? Do you need help setting stuff up? I see there's 3 of you." And I'm like, "Yeah, I didn't feel too good." So he was like willing to like come help me set up my kitchen, and you know, because we're all camped out there. And that just goes to show that even today, and at Standing Rock, that was kind of the vibration, but I was clearly a white person that had just shown up at Standing Rock. And the Standing Rock movement was an amazing thing because that's the first time that many tribes were in one place in a cooperative way. And they were praying to save the water. The water protectors were absolutely moving. So I just want to say that your tribe was definitely honored there, and they were part of it just like everyone else.
That's beautiful.
And you are seen, you are loved just the way you are. So I just want you to know that although some of our culture may not honor your tribe, and I'm happy to help harvest all of the cultural beauty of the tribe. I think that there's beauty in all of these cultures that have been left, and I want to see you harvest your cultural ways. So as we close, is there anything else that we needed to address? You guys have a two-spirit. You guys use the two-spirit because most indigenous tribes use two-spirit. Does Taino use two-spirit too?
Yes, they use the two spirits. But like in any, you have those that are very accepting, and then those that would have that colonized mentality. But I'm sure that happens with a lot of different tribes, not just us. With our, But I can say that we are very open, inclusive, and we just look at the individual who's walking through that door, and that's it.
I think we touched pretty much everything. Did we get to touch everything? I think so.
If there's anything we missed, we can always revisit real quick. And so now I'm shuffling the cards as we've been just saying our ending comments, and I'm using a deck called Love is Love, and it is a GLBTQIA collaborative deck, which very much aligns with me personally because I love to collaborate with people. I love to do things. It's the Libra in me. So anyway, and so each one of these cards is a different GLBTQI artist, and so I'll be showing them to you. This reading right now is for everybody watching and anybody watching, even if you're watching the rerun. This is for you too. If you hear something that vibrates for you, that resonates in your world. Now, just because I say it, if it doesn't feel like it's for you, it's okay. No big deal. Just let it go. But take what you like and leave the rest. It's one of my favorite sayings from the 12-step program. And so the first card, you know, is reminding us of something in the future. And this is actually a really interesting card. I've stumbled across this card once before. It's a very non-binary person laying there with their dog, which actually kind of reminds me of me. Just kind of chilling and connecting with nature. So I think this card really, but they've forgotten about one of the swords. And swords in tarot always represent thoughts or beliefs. Okay. And so be aware of that one thought that maybe you forgot about from the past, especially. And one of the things that is resonating out of this card would be that in the past, you remember when COVID first started and all of us were like, oh, the animals are awakening and all these wonderful things started happening on the planet. And somehow, miraculously, Mother Nature was coming back. It felt like Mother Nature was waking up. I don't know if you got to read that news, but if you didn't, check it out. What happened at the beginning of COVID to Mother Nature? And be aware of her resilience. And that's what this card is, to remind you of that feeling. Remind you of that feeling right now, because right now, my favorite card, it has 3 drag queens on it. And clearly, even racially different. And the beautiful part is up above them is they're actually pentacles, which are considered like gifts, or could also represent money, like, you know, good things or things that you receive. And also up there are the planets. So it's astrology, which is a gift in itself. And this is a 6 of Pentacles, which is very much a celebration of the divine. So right now, the cards are telling us to take what you learned in the beginning and take that forward, because each and every one of us has a gift for the world. And we all know that it probably is in honoring nature, in harvesting our connection to nature. Our cultures, our indigenous cultures are connected to nature. That's what this is all about. That's what astrology is all about. And when you look up in the sky, remember how small you are, but also remember your inner divinity, your inner power, your inner drag queen, your inner drag king. When you can step on stage and own the stage, I know the craft knows exactly how that feels. All of us have a way that we can step on stage. What is that? Bring it to the world right now, because we need you, because we need to save the earth. We need to all come together, bring our cultures back, especially the ones that harvested our connection with nature. And this is a beautiful card, the 4 of Wands. It has 2 people of color, a person of color, and I would say an interracial couple of some sort, probably a queer couple of some sort. And to me, this always looks like a trans woman and maybe a trans masculine person or a non-binary person. And so for me, that always reminds me of the beauty of being queer, that you never have to be in a box. Be who you are. Don't feel like you have to do what everyone else is doing. And instead, do it the way you want to do it, because that's what these 2 people here are doing, right? They're celebrating their love. And that's what we're all about to do. We're all, as the human race, we are all about to bring our gifts forward, collaborate with who you need to collaborate with, step forward, and be ready. Be ready to embrace the gifts that are on their way that look like the 4 of Wands is usually a celebration of collaborations, like either networking or even couples. Can you imagine if you could have a beautiful, like, you know, Taino wedding, right? And that honors the new ways and the old ways. Yes? So, and so that's what the beauty of this card is, an honoring of all the different ways that the world resonates for all of us. So I want to say that together, these three cards are indicating very important, beautiful message, which is simple yet direct, is that we have come a long way. Remember your connection to the earth. And if you have a gift, bring it. Everyone has a gift. Bring your gift, because your gift, whether it connects people, whether it directly heals the planet, some even like Lacrosse's show, A Kaleidoscope Eyes, where he celebrates all queer people. That beautiful storytelling helps us understand each other. Understanding brings peace. So whatever it is that you have to bring to the world, bring it, because the collaborations are waiting for you. The next gift is waiting for you, whatever that is. And as we evolve as a human race, the world is bound to get better, especially if we start harvesting each other's cultures and giving each other room to be exactly who you are, just the way you are, just the way you were made. You are perfectly imperfect, and that's who you're supposed to be, and I'm glad you're here. So I want to say to all of the queer people out there, regardless of the color of your skin, the culture that you come from, or whatever it is, whatever keeps you being different, even if you're just a weirdo like me, hey, stop. You are perfectly imperfect. Take a look at your astrology chart. You were made this way. It's an interesting thing. So that's what I wanted to say. And if anyone else has any closing comments before we go, any messages for everyone, we got people thanking us. Esperanzi, thank you for the wisdom. Thank you, Esperanzi, for always watching the show. Appreciate you, my friend. And Sandy Griffith has really enjoyed the whole show. And Bright Hawk has enjoyed the conversation, and we're so glad. Any other closing comments from either of you?
Oh, no, I think we've covered. You go ahead.
Thank you for allowing me to be here. And, and I think that as the world turns, we continue to evolve, and I have faith that humanity will become a better sense of itself.
Absolutely.
Be the best that you can be.
Exactly. 100%. Well, thank you for coming on the show, even though, yes, I forced you. I forced you. But thank you so much, because I think our culture, people need to know more. And if the more we educate, the more people will learn, and hopefully keep shifting and changing. And there go the motorcycles again. So
well, thank you both for bringing
thank you, Hollis.
Thank you.
Because I think I'm just going to say it's fucking important. And I'm using fucking to accentuate that it is important. It's important. And I want people to know it. So I'm so glad to bring you on, to have you both with your beautiful wisdom. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching Rainbow Soul, part of the WLFE DB Network, a queer perspective on spirituality beyond religion. We appreciate you sharing the show on your timeline. Follow us on social media of your choice, and join our Facebook group, Rainbow Soul. We want to hear from you. Share your topic ideas for Hollis and Lacrosse. Explore upcoming shows and interesting guests. The Rainbow Soul Facebook group, where we build community of questioning seekers. Rainbow Soul, where spirituality is our medicine.
WLFE-DB Radio has LGBTQ shows like Across the Pond, Rainbow Soul, Everything Yet Nothing, and Inside the Drag Closet. Check out the schedule on WLFE-DB.com. You can even watch them on TV at WLFE-DB.com under LGBTQ Friends, right off our website. Again, it's WLFE-DB.com for your LGBTQ shows and more.
WLFE-DB.com, where talk radio is a whole lot better. Our shows are your shows, and that there makes for a great talk radio.